Hi, this is Carrie Schell from On Point Quilter. Last week I introduced you to the infinite star within Electric Quilt. This week I decided to add another hexagonal quilt, and this one with a pieced border. So I'm going to start by going to the layout library, and I'm going to go down to the Basics by Style and go to the hexagonal. And I'm going to go over to number 7, which looks like a star within a star. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to the sketchbook. And I'll go ahead and close that. I also am going to pull some blocks in from the block library. And the first one I'm going to find is Birds of the Air. And I'm going to type in birds. And I'm going to take that first one there, Birds in the Air, and add that to the sketchbook. And for the next one, I'm going to find a Broken Dishes. And I will go ahead and add that to the sketchbook. Now I have 2 other blocks that I want to include, and I couldn't find them in the library, so I just decided to draft them. So to do that, I'm going to select Work on Block. And the first one is basically a very simple log cabin block. And so I'm going to do a block, new block, easy draw. And I'm going to make the block 6 by 6, the snaps 6 by 6. And for the graph paper, I'm going to do 3 by 3 because what I want to do for the block is first just draw one line at the 2-inch mark on the ruler, the next one at the 2-inch going across, and then the third one is another 2-inch, and the fourth one is 2-inch. Basically, it's a square with one layer of logs going around it. So I'm just going to color that, and I'll add that to the sketchbook. Now the next one is sort of a variation between the Birds in the Air and the Lady of the Lake, except that I'm going to work off of a 4 by 4 grid. So I'll do a block, new block, easy draw block. And I'm going to go ahead and make that 4 by 4, the snaps 4 by 4, and the graph paper 4 by 4. And I'm only going to use half the block, so I'm going to just start by drawing a diagonal line through it. And then I'm going to take half the block and bisect it at basically 1 inch in both directions, and I'm going to go ahead and finish doing every inch going across there and there, and then I'll finish by basically putting some diagonal lines. And now I am ready to color that as well. And for that piece that I'm not going to use, what I like to do is go ahead and color it in a color that's not going to be in my quilt. So when it shows up in the fabric yardage charts, I will know that I can ignore it. So I'll go ahead now and add that to the sketchbook. So I'm going to go ahead and view my sketchbook. And I'm going to go to the Quilts tab, and I'm going to navigate to that last quilt that I pulled in, and I will select Edit. And I'm going to start by deleting those borders because I will add my own borders later. And I'm going to change the layout size. This is really 100 by 87. That's a really big quilt. And I want to make this more of a wall quilt. I also want to make the pieces so that I can use my 60-degree rulers, and so I want to make them equal divisions. So let me flip over to a Word document, and I'm going to share with you some math in terms of how I do that calculation. Now, if you look at the isosceles triangle here, you can see that you have three sides. And if you look at the math on the internet, basically this one perpendicular item here, or this long one here, is calculated at the square root of 3. So if this is 1, this is the hypotenuse is double that, which is 2, and this, if this is a 60-degree angle, is a square root of 3, which really all that is 1.732. So from a math perspective, if I know what any of these three measurements are, I can calculate the other two. If I know what C is, that is equal to B times 1.155, or B is equal to C times 0.866. So that's really all your basic math is. So if you look at my quilt diagram here, you can count and see that there are 8 equal divisions going top to bottom, and 8 equal divisions going left to right. Now the left to right is longer because it is basically equal to the 1.155 times the length. So if I wanted each of these divisions on here, each of these 8 divisions, to be 4 inches, then the length of my inner quilt here would be equal to 4 times 8, or 32. The width would be this 4 by 8, but then times that 1.155, or 37. So I'm going to go back to EQ now, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the layout. I'm going to change my width to 37, and I'm going to change my height to 32. Now, before I did that, actually, I should have gone to my More Quilt Work Table options, go to the layout style, and make sure that the Don't Resize Contents of Layer when resizing quilt is not checked, because I want to resize. So as I brought that layout down, I brought the blocks down as well. So this is okay, so I'm fine, but I'm going to now go to layer 1, and you can see that my quilt is now 37 by 32. Now I'm going to go ahead and I am going to fill in these blocks. So I will use the set block, and I'm going to go ahead and put the broken dishes in each of these center ones. And you can see that when I'm putting these in the triangle, it's actually cutting off part of the block. So it's creating a unique design when I do that. Now, when I put that same broken dishes in the 4-sided 60-degree trapezoid, notice that the entire block appears, but it is elongated. So you get a very different look depending on where you put the block. Now I'm going to take my modified log cabin, and I'm going to set that in these big triangles. And for this, I'm going to also go ahead and use the rotate block. And then for the outer pieces, I'm going to go ahead and use a birds of the air block for that. And you can see I need to do some rotation, so I'll use a rotate block. And so I've got a very interesting quilt, frankly using some very, very simple blocks. So now let's talk about my outer border. if you go to the borders, and I'm going to go ahead and add one, and it is the border called Points In. And I'm going to go ahead and make that 4.5 inches. This is basically what the border would look like, but these are not yet 60-degree angles. And so I've got a little bit of calculating to do to get me to that point. So I'm going to go back to my Word document. I am going to assume that my border with the points is going to be 4.5 inches. Now you could make that whatever you want, and the other assumption that I wanted to use was that the triangles again are 60 degrees, so it is very much in keeping with that hexagonal layout. So I need to calculate how many points I need, but I also need to calculate what my inner border should be. So let me share with you how to do that. So we've already calculated that going across the length of that inside quilt center is 37 inches. Well, I know that my border is going to be 4.5 inches wide. And I also know, based on what we've already done, that if that's 4.5 wide, the length of one of those legs is going to be 1.155 times the 4.5. So if I take 37 and divide it by 4.5 and the end by 1.155, it equals 7.1. Now, because the border has to be bigger than the inside, I've got to always round up. So that 7.1 is going to round up to 8. Then I'm going to take the 8 times the 4.5 times the 1.155, and that means that this border going across without the corners is 41.6. So my inner border has to equal that outer border, which is that 41.6, minus my center measurement, which is 37, divided by 2. And so that is 2.29. I would end up rounding that to 2.25. For the top and bottom inner border, I'm going to calculate my repeats the same. So I'm going to take my 32, I'm going to divide it by 4.5 and then by 1.155. So that's going to be 6.2. I'm going to round that up to 7. Take my 7 times the 4.5 times the 1.155, and it's 36.4. So that's going to be the length or the height of my quilt center inner outer border. So to calculate the inner border, I'm going to take that outer border minus the center, so 46.8. Actually, that should be 36.4 minus the 32 divided by 2, which is 2.2, and again I'm going to round that up to 2.25. So let's go back to EQ, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and in this layout tab I'm going to change the top and the bottom to have 8, and I'm going to change the left and the right to have 7. And that's just from the math worksheet that I just took you through. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a border, and I'm going to change that to 2.25. Click on the slider bar before, and this should now mean that all of these outside pieces are based on a 60-degree angle. Now here's how you check it. I'm going to go to layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to color a couple of blocks, and I'm going to select that block. I'm going to print the rotary cutting. Now I'm not going to print it, but I want to preview it, and I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see that my angles are 60. So that's my validation that I did my math correctly. And now I'm going to go to the second one, and I'm going to print my rotary cutting for that, preview that, zoom in, and that is 60 as well. So again, the math works on this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the block, and I'm going to take this variation of Lady of the Lakes and Birds of the Air. While setting the block, I will use the Alt key on my keyboard so that I can set the entire row at the same time. And I'm going to do the left, the bottom, and the right. And I'm going to have to do some rotation. I'm also going to go ahead and put this block in the corners. So if I do the Control and set that, then it is in the corners. So now I'm going to use the rotate, and I'm going to select the first block, and again I'm going to use the Alt, and I'm just going to click it twice, and that's 3 clicks. I need to rotate that, and this one with the Alt is just 1 click, and that is 3 clicks. Now I'm going to go ahead and color that. Okay, I finished coloring, but then I thought, I think I've got a couple more changes. First, I do need to rotate a couple more blocks, and I think that makes more sense. And then I thought, what about adding just a plain border? So I'll go to the border tab, do an add. If this one is 4.5, maybe I'll make this one 2 1/4, which I think helps with the proportions. So for that one, I'll use my eyedropper tool, and I think I'll use that for it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add to the sketchbook, and I will save my project as well. Thanks so much for watching. For additional tips and techniques, please subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.onpointquilter.com.